everyone, welcome back to my channel, and for today we're going to be answering the question of are you cursed? Did someone curse you? So the first thing we're going to be discussing is what is a curse? What is the difference between a curse, a hex, and a jinx? And also, if you'd like to know how to protect yourself from a curse, a hex, or jinx, stick around to the end of the video because that's when I'll be explaining how. So the first thing we need to understand is what is a curse, what is a hex, and a jinx. So we'll start with a jinx. The jinx is the smallest version of any of this. It's easily sent out, it's easily received. It's like a little bit of a jab, essentially, right? Like it's a little bit of a small psychic attack. So that means, for example, evil eye, though that can kind of go over into a hex. It's kind of like just, you know, bad luck type of thing. You might be like, oh, constantly arriving at a red light. You might be stubbing your toe, or potentially, you know, your favorite mug broke. That is a little bit of a jinx. It's just like a stab, some little inconvenience, your shoelaces keep untying, that type of thing. It's pretty easy to send and it's also pretty easy to receive. What is a hex? Now a hex is the next step up of that, of course. So essentially it's more inconvenient. It's a bigger type of psychic attack, and it can stick on you for longer, but it also takes the practitioner or the witch a little bit more strength to send that out, a little bit more of a dedication. It's not as accidental. With a jinx, it can be sometimes accidental, out of anger or out of heightened emotions, whereas a hex already is a little bit of like an intention, right? Like this is already someone who's like intentionally sending you something. A hex can be having nightmares and waking up from them. It can be, you know, bad luck for a really long time. So a really long time is, for example, a month that you are just experiencing bad luck. It's these type of things. You could be already getting ill from a hex. Perhaps you are, you know, sick and you just cannot get past it no matter what you are doing. And I think that's a part of it that's important to kind of note, is no matter what you do, like within the mundane life, it just doesn't go away. And that's something to use to identify either a curse, hex, or jinx. And then we've got the curse itself. Now a curse is a long-lasting series of bad events. It is a severe psychic attack. It can really harm you. This is, we're talking like severe illness, severely bad luck, not just bad luck, but like sometimes even life traumatic events that can come from a curse. These are things that take a lot for a practitioner or a witch to send to you, and they do the most harm. And now we're going to quickly make a note here. Sometimes people will think that they have a generational curse on them, and I would like to make a note of the fact that if you are receiving someone in your DMs on Instagram, for example, or on anywhere else, and someone says, hi, I'm a psychic witch, or I'm like a practitioner, and I think you have a curse on you, the spirits have told me, you have a scammer problem, not a curse problem. For the most part, at least, like 99.9%. A lot of the times people use this obviously to scam people, and then on the other hand, a lot of times people are kind of like fear-mongered into thinking that they are cursed, and then they see all the bad things that happen, and then they're like, oh, these are signs, you know? And it's like, no, you're just like specifically kind of like looking for these signs, even though they're not really there, but you know, you've kind of just like got it in your mind, and mind over matter sometimes. And I know people call it placebo, but like you would be surprised how strong your mind is at like for example, take a phantom pregnancy. You can really like you can completely convince yourself, or like phantom, there's a couple of phantom illnesses, of course, right? As well, like you can really convince yourself of these things as well. So that is something to actually consider. Personally, that is what I try to think of first, is when I'm trying to see if I'm cursed, hexed, or jinxed, is could this be mundane? Could this just be bad luck? Could this just be like I woke up with a little bit of an attitude or something like that, you know, slept badly, and then I'm just not paying attention, and like I'm just like bumping my toe and things like that, right? Is it really a curse? A lot of times it's not, but let's have a look. How do we actually identify a curse? So why do you think you are cursed, hexed or jinxed. Moving forward in the video, I'll just use cursed, but it can also apply for hexed or jinxed. Why do you think you're cursed? Because again, if someone has told you, I'd be very wary of that. However, if you, for example, have had reoccurring nightmares, if you have just got that weird feeling all over you, that like weird icky feeling all over you, or you're just having like really bad things happen to you, and potentially there was a point, a tipping point, right? Like for example, you did something that you perhaps shouldn't have, or you picked something up, you bought something that is now making you feel really queasy, you thrifted something, or you pissed someone off, and now you're having all these bad things happen to you. That would be reason for potentially saying, okay, this might be something. How do you then act against it, right? That's going to be in the next section. We're still in the identification section. Now you might also be wondering, okay, you moved somewhere new. Why are all these bad things happening to you now, right? Is this house cursed? Is this land cursed? Because that's something that you need to consider. Sometimes it's not actually a curse, but it is a disgruntled spirit. Now let's get into that for a second. A disgruntled spirit can look like a land spirit that is angry that you, for example, are living on stolen land, or you are just not treating the land very well. That could be a disgruntled spirit for the land. It could be a different type of disgruntled spirit. For example, if you spat or trashed the local graveyard, which I would haunt you too, then perhaps that is a disgruntled spirit. Or perhaps if you practiced a spell, if you did a spell and now you think you're cursed. Is it actually a curse? Or is it the spirit seeking payment for their services? Because I think a lot of times what people underestimate is nothing can come from nothing. Like, you cannot have a spirit do this working for you and then, or the spell, if you are an animist like I am, the spell itself is like an energy. It needs to be able to draw from somewhere. That can be from you supplying that energy by, for example, you know, having an offering. That's why a lot of times we have offerings. A lot of times the ingredients are offerings in themselves. That's where you draw the energy from. A lot of times it's actually a spirit that you didn't pay. Now, and if you didn't pay that spirit, then they're going to be drawing it out of you. And that can feel like a curse, even though it's not a curse, but it can feel like one. So a lot of times when people, especially if you come out of like that idea of like, oh, it's going to return to you 3 times, right? Which is a Wiccan, well, it's not even. Whole different topic. In any case, you don't have to believe in that. It's not a, you must believe in this. It's kind of like believing in Christian commandments or the Torah or the Quran or any other, you know, religious tenet. If you are not part of that, if you don't believe in that, then you don't even have to worry about that, right? But a lot of people do still think and cling to this idea that something that you send out is going to return to you. And a lot of times it's actually just the spell itself taking energy from somewhere. And if you didn't give the energy that is needed with an offering or with providing a food source, for example, right, then it's going to take it and draw it from you, and that's really uncomfortable. And that might be what is happening as well. Now, of course, then you also have the potential that you did not have good psychic hygiene. What that means is, for example, if you did do any sort of spell, even if it is painful, for example, you do need to protect yourself. If you are in an energetic zone, for example, if you did one of those tours to visit a haunted house and you didn't protect yourself psychically, then, and you had bad spiritual hygiene, then something might have said, you're an easy target, I'm just bored, I'm gonna fuck with you. And then it's going to like cling to you, right? That could happen too. The same thing with thrifting. A lot of times, especially as a person that practices witchcraft, if I go thrifting, I'm going to have things on me, talisman, charms and stuff like that to protect myself, because sometimes, yeah, spirits are lonely and they just want to come along and you don't like that. So that is something to consider as well. A lot of times it's not a curse, it's just a spirit. Now, then we talk about cursed objects, because that's kind of that like weird in between where it's like a disgruntled spirit and then we call it a cursed object. Same for like a house and things like that, right? Where something really dark has happened, or it's genuinely a spirit and it's a spirit house where the cursed object is essentially the spirit house where that spirit is living in, and it's just the spirit that is just like not that nice, which can happen. That's a thing to consider as well, of course. And now let's get into the next section of how do we actually seriously identify if it is a curse, if it is a cursed object, or what this is, what's going on here. My number one tip is going to be, of course, to get advice from someone who is more knowledgeable than you if you have the opportunity to do so. So that might be a different witch that you know that could help you with this. Especially if this is something that's scaring you, I would say get help. Make sure that you have the support from someone, especially if this is something that's a bit more serious. It could potentially be dangerous. I'm not going to fluff this and be like, oh, you know, don't worry about it. Like, it could potentially end up being dangerous. At the same time, I don't want to like put too much fear into you either. A tarot reading, for example, is something that you can definitely do, or if you work with any other divination system, such as the pendulum or tea readings or any other what have you divination system, can definitely help you identify this again. This is something that I again need to really highlight here. Do not let the person that is just like popping into your DMs, that is offering out of their own, you know, free will or whatever, they're probably a scammer. In my opinion, if you have the situation, make sure that you seek help by looking up someone that offers this service, and also make sure that you make sure that that person is legit and not just someone who wants to make money, essentially, right? Or is sometimes also such a beginner that they don't really know how to identify these things themselves. That's not a knock on that beginner or that practitioner. It's just like, it's something that you also learn with time and experience. Now, obviously a big part is going to also please be logic. Again, the mundane does still exist and it can still happen that it is just bad luck and it's not a curse at all. But let's continue. A thing that I also suggest, and that's probably the first thing that I would be suggesting to anyone, is going to be to take a cleansing bath or shower. Now, you can go about this in multiple ways. You can take an actual body of water, like a stream especially, because it's going to literally like move things away from you and take it away. So that's a great one to be doing, even if it's just your feet, your naked feet in that body of water. If you don't have that as a possibility, a shower is great too. A bathtub can be good too, because you're like really soaking and then flushing it away. If you are taking a shower or a bath, then using a special spell can work with that as well. For example, a little bit of bathing salt, because salt again is really cleansing. A lot of times, especially with salt, obviously please make sure you're not using salt outside in nature. Carthage, remember Carthage? Please make sure you're not salting anything outside. But if you are using, for example, a bath, you can get bath salts and things like that. Also, certain other parts can be used, other herbs and things like that as well can be used to cleanse yourself. I do have a spell in my book that uses the morning, dawn, as well as a bath and a couple of herbs. In case you have my book, then you're more than welcome, of course, to look that up. Now, if you are also someone like me, I really look to my dreams. And if I have, for example, and I have, this sounds crazy, I have a working relationship with a sleep paralysis demon, and that sleep paralysis demon doesn't do me harm, but they know to tip me off if something is amiss. And we go tight. But that is something that is important for me, for example. Now, if you have some kind of like clairvoyancy that you know that works really well for you, or you have a special plant that is, for example, I'm just using plant as an example because that's another one that a lot of practitioners will have and use as an example, is you have a protective plant, and if you've been watering that plant and taking such good care of that plant, and that plant is just thriving, and all of a sudden nothing around it has changed. No watering habits have changed, the pH isn't off, the temperature isn't suddenly off, the sunlight isn't suddenly off, and the plant is wilting, then that plant is letting you know someone is trying to send something to you, and the plant took that for you. That's another reason to then obviously like protect yourself and potentially send something back. In general, if you have a working spirit cord, that means you have spirits that you're working with, they will be able to tip you off in case something is amiss. And of course, if you're a complete beginner, then that may be something that is new to you, but a great one to look into is your ancestors, again, plants that you're working with. So First of all, how do we uncross ourselves? How do we cleanse ourselves? As I already said, shower, bath, things like that. Then you can also work with specific rituals. Again, there's a couple of different rituals you can do here. My favorite one is a return to sender. Again, I have a return to sender spell in my book, as well as here on my channel. That's going to be up here, so you can check that out. But I love a return to sender because you're essentially just literally, as the name suggests, returning it without actually, you know, putting in more of your own effort or adding some spice. However, you can add more banefulness, but the thing is here, and that's really, really important within curses in general, is when someone curses you, they are sending a part of themselves. A curse has a little bit of an identification code, right? It's going to have some traceability, and that usually is going to be tracing back to that witch that sent you something. So one popular one is, for example, a witch's bottle. And in a witch's bottle, it is essentially a decoy where if someone sends you a curse, the curse will be confused and just jump to that bottle instead of you. It's supposed to take over anything negative for you and take kind of the hit. So that's why you use urine. Now, I know a lot of people don't like using urine, but that is the best way to do it. You can use another tag, like your hair, your spit, like cut-offs from when you cut your cuticles, things like that. Your blood, of course, is a great one. The best are urine and blood. That's just the nature of it. That's why witchcraft isn't necessarily for everyone. So a witch's bottle is great, and you can see historical recordings of them, so they are a time-trusted, very effective thing that you can be doing. My camera died, so I'm not really sure where I was, but I'm pretty sure I was at protection. There's many ways that you can protect yourself. If you have already kind of washed away that curse and you already are feeling much better, then another thing that I can highly suggest is actually to implement and use different elements and make use of the elementals, work with the elementals. This can come in the form of, for example, grounding and centering, where you are passing that energy over to earth, or maybe a specific spirit, or, you know, some other natural spirit, earth spirit, that is going to take care of it for you. If you are, again, with water, I already mentioned. If you have something from the person that you know is the witch that sent you a curse, this can also be a picture. Burn it. Fire is a great one for literally cleansing and burning, and it's also something that if you have something that is cursed potentially and you are okie dokie with getting rid of it, then burn it. You can also bury it, of course, and then hopefully that takes it on, and then sometimes, not all the time, depending on how severe of a situation it is. If it's a curse, it can be lifted by burying it, and then you know, after like a week, for example, or a whole full moon, you can take it out and then it'll hopefully be cleansed. If it's a spirit, difficult. Probably not. That's going to take a little bit more energy, but that's going to be for a different video. Also, air, of course, can also be used and employed for this as well. A lot of things can, you know, take your creativity here, or look these up specifically within your culture as well. There are going to be loads of folklore bits where, you know, you're going to be surprised. Whispered to the wind, for example. Now, to protect yourself, there's also a various amount of ways that you can protect yourself. I've already mentioned some. Having, of course, an active spirit cord that you have a really good relationship with, which, by the way, is going to take some time. It's not as easy as introducing yourself and then you're immediately friends. That's not how that works. It's going to take a little bit of time and effort, but once you have a working relationship with these spirits, then they can kind of take on a little bit of a protection for you, as well as to just tip you off in case something is coming your way, because then you can, of course, deflect and protect. So protection can also look like oils. I have my own oils that I make myself. I'm also selling them in my shop if that is something you're looking for. Hexbane in particular is not only a protection spell, but it's also a little bit defensive. It's like a little bit of a barbed wire situation. So protective oils can really work. If you work with veils, they can protect you. Charms will protect you. Then there's going to be loads of cultural charms. For example, the evil eye in kind of the Mediterranean cultures is a very popular one, of course. Then, of course, you have like the hare's foot or the rabbit foot that is protective. There's a bunch of different protective charms that you can do. Again, I have loads of them in my book. I also have done a couple of protective kind of videos on my channel, so I'll link them all below in my description box for you. I hope that kind of cleared a couple of things up for you if you are still with questions, you're more than welcome to leave them in the description box below. If you have something to add, perhaps I overlooked something or just didn't mention it, leave it in the description box below. And with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot if you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Again, if you would like to directly support my shop, then the best way to do that is through my Patreon or my witchcraft store. Again, I do have loads of things on my witchcraft store that could be interesting to you in regards to protection, things like that. So definitely go check that out. As for my Patreon, you'll find extra content over there. You'll see a lot more in-depth things over there as well. So go take a look at that. The lowest tier is a supportive tier, only $1. So thank you so much for considering that. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. May you walk with your gods. Bye.